Take a slow breath, settle in, and let your mind drift somewhere ancient and quiet, far beneath the waves. Beneath the gray waters of the North Sea, there lies a world that was once alive with forests, rivers, and wandering creatures. Long ago, roughly 10,000 years before today, a broad stretch of land connected Britain to mainland Europe. Geologists call this sunken country Doggerland, named after the Dogger Bank, a shallow ridge that was once its highest ground. In those early days, dense forests of oak and pine grew quietly across the lowlands where fish now swim. Slowly, the glaciers of the last ice age began to melt, and meltwater flowed down into the surrounding seas. The sea level rose, not in sudden floods, but in a steady, patient creep across the centuries. The forests that once rustled with wind and birdsong found themselves gradually surrounded by shallow, salt-laced water. Tree by tree, the woodland was swallowed, until only the treetops remained, then nothing at all. Today, fishermen sometimes dredge up ancient pieces of wood, bone, and peat from the seafloor of the North Sea. These quiet remnants tell the story of a landscape that once breathed, grew, and held life within it. Scientists studying these samples have found pollen from hazel and alder, seeds of water lily, and the bones of deer. And so the forest rests now, patient and still, somewhere beneath the slow, breathing surface of the sea. Long before the seas rose, a vast open plain stretched where the North Sea lies today, quiet and unhurried beneath pale skies. This land, now called Doggerland, once covered an area larger than Britain, a gentle world of rivers, wetlands, and rolling meadows. Across these quiet plains, woolly mammoths moved slowly in small herds, their thick reddish-brown coats warming them against the cool northern air. The mammoths were enormous and calm, their curved ivory tusks sweeping downward as they browsed the grasses and sedges of the plain. Beneath their broad feet, the earth was firm and frost-threaded, a patchwork of moss, coarse grass, and ancient wildflowers. Nearby, rivers wound slowly through the lowlands, their banks lined with willows and birch, their waters still and silver in the morning light. The mammoths were not alone on this plain. Reindeer, wild horses, and woolly rhinoceros roamed alongside them in the cool, open air. Fossil evidence of all these creatures has been pulled up from the seabed, preserved in the silts of what was once their home. Fisher nets trawling the North Sea floor have brought up mammoth teeth and ancient bones, quiet messengers from a world long submerged. In time, the mammoths would have followed the seasons, moving across the plain as grasses greened in spring and browned in autumn. The land held a deep quietness about it, broken only by the slow wind moving through the sedges and the sound of the river. From the high ground at the center of the plain, one could see for many miles in every direction, a world of unbroken horizon and open sky. And slowly, across thousands of years, the mammoths grazed and wandered through this gentle world, unaware of the seas that would one day cover everything. Long before the sea took everything, a great river moved quietly through the heart of Doggerland, broader than the Rhine we know today. Geologists call it the Outwash River, a vast channel fed by meltwater streams draining from glaciers far to the north and east. Its waters ran clear and cold, carrying fine silts across a floodplain that stretched for many miles in every direction. The river was not a border or a barrier, it was a corridor, a living road through which animals and people moved for thousands of years. Herds of aurochs came to drink along its shallow margins, their great dark shapes reflected gently in the still water near the banks. Red deer moved through the willow thickets fringing the floodplain, following ancient paths worn smooth by generations before them. Mesolithic people built their camps on the higher ground above the floodplain, looking out over the river as it wound slowly toward the distant coast. From this great river, smaller channels branched outward like fingers, carrying water into marshes and oxbow lakes across the broad plain. Pollen preserved in ancient sediments tells us that alder and birch lined the riverbanks, their roots anchoring the soft earth against the current. The river carried more than water, it carried the seeds of trees, the eggs of fish, and the fine memory of seasons long since past. In time, as the climate gently warmed after the last glaciation, sea levels crept slowly higher, season by season, year by year. The river's mouth, once far inland, began to feel the push of the tide, the salt mixing quietly with the fresh water far upstream. Slowly, over centuries, the river that had always belonged to the land began its long surrender to the sea. Along what is now the southern floor of the North Sea, there once stretched a wide and gentle coastal plain, soft with marsh grass and morning mist. Small communities settled here thousands of years ago, building their homes close to the shore where fish were plentiful and the land was kind. The sea in those early centuries was patient and slow, rising only a few millimeters with each passing year, so gently that no single generation could feel its advance. Families gathered driftwood along these beaches, shaped simple tools from flint, and dried fish in the open air beside their quiet settlements. The lagoons and tidal creeks of this land were rich with life, offering shelter to migrating birds and calm water for small reed boats. In time, the water crept slowly inland, flooding the lowest meadows first, the ones nearest the sea that had always caught the tide. People moved their hearts a little higher, carrying their tools and their stories to firmer ground, adapting quietly as generations always do. The old paths between villages disappeared beneath brackish water, turning familiar trails into shallow crossings that eventually vanished altogether. Fishermen began to haul up not only their nets but fragments of the old world, pieces of antler, preserved timber, and worked bone from the drowned settlements below. The coastline that had once stretched for many miles slowly narrowed, the sea reclaiming broad beaches that had known the footprints of entire communities. Beneath the North Sea today, sonar surveys have mapped the ghost outlines of ancient river channels, lagoon edges, and the low ridges where villages once stood. Trawlers working these waters still occasionally bring up mammoth teeth and wooden spear shafts, quiet relics of the world that slowly sank beneath the waves. And so the land rests quietly now beneath the gray-green water, patient and still, holding the memory of those coastal villages in its layered, undisturbed sediment. Beneath the dark seafloor of the North Sea, bones of ancient aurochs lie buried in deep layers of soft sediment. These were enormous cattle, standing taller than any horse, roaming freely across the wide plains of Doggerland long ago. Trawler nets pulling through the sea sometimes bring up these great curved horns, dark with age, still perfectly formed. Scientists have carefully dated these bones, finding that the aurochs lived here thousands of years before the sea arrived. The sediment that holds them is layered like pages of a very old book, each stratum telling a quiet story. In some layers, pollen from ancient forest trees is preserved alongside the bones, painting a picture of a living land. Slowly, over thousands of years, the land that aurochs walked upon sank gently beneath the rising waters. The bones settled deep, undisturbed, resting in their quiet burial beneath the patient North Sea. Occasionally, a single bone surfaces on a beach in the Netherlands or England, smoothed by centuries of slow movement. In museum collections, these bones are held with great care, labeled with the coordinates of their watery origin. The aurochs was the ancestor of all domestic cattle, a creature of enormous strength and quiet dignity. Far below the ships that cross the North Sea today, the world those aurochs knew remains intact, frozen in time. In the sediment, time moves differently, and the bones of Doggerland rest as they always have, quietly and still. Across thousands of years, the great ice sheets that once blanketed northern Europe began their long, gradual withdrawal toward the poles. In the far north, tongues of glacial ice stretched down from the highlands, creeping slowly across land that would one day be swallowed by the sea. As temperatures rose imperceptibly season by season, the frozen edges of these great rivers of ice softened and pulled back, releasing the land beneath. Meltwater poured from the retreating glaciers in thin silver threads, carving gentle channels through the exposed soils of the emerging plain. The land that had been pressed down by the immense weight of ice began slowly rising again, a quiet process that took centuries to unfold. Where glaciers had rested, they left behind moraines of gravel and clay, gentle ridges that would shape the landscape of Doggerland for millennia. Along the southern margins of the retreating ice, shallow lakes formed in hollows scooped by ancient glaciers, their surfaces still and reflecting pale sky. Mosses and low sedges were among the first plants to return, creeping slowly across the cold, bare earth left behind by the retreating ice. Reindeer and woolly creatures followed these thin ribbons of new growth northward, grazing the edges of the receding ice across the open plain. The cold air that had once swept unbroken from the ice fields grew softer with each passing decade, carrying hints of moisture from distant warming seas. Rivers that had run sluggishly beneath the ice now flowed freely, braiding across the open lowlands and feeding the first meadows of Doggerland. Far to the north, the last remnants of the great ice sheet still lingered on high ground, slow to surrender their ancient hold on the earth. And so the slow retreat continued, season after season, in its own quiet and unhurried time, gradually shaping the world that Doggerland would become. Off the eastern coast of England, beneath the grey-green waters of the North Sea, there lies a world that time has quietly forgotten. For thousands of years, fishing vessels have cast their nets into these same cold waters, hauling up more than just the day's catch. Among the tangled lines and silver fish, crewmen occasionally find something unexpected, a smooth, dark stone worked into a careful point. These are Neolithic flint blades, shaped by human hands perhaps 8,000 or 9,000 years ago, drawn up from the ocean floor. Each one was once held by a person who walked upon dry land where only water now exists. The nets themselves, heavy with rope and lead, sweep slowly through the sediment, disturbing layers of ancient soil and peat. Preserved beneath the sea for millennia, this organic peat once formed the dark earth of forests and river valleys. When trawlers drag these blades to the surface, they arrive encrusted with barnacles and sea growth, yet unmistakably shaped by human intention. Museums across the Netherlands and Britain hold quiet rooms where thousands of these recovered pieces rest in careful order. Fishermen from Dutch ports in particular have contributed great numbers, their nets routinely crossing the shallow Dogger Bank. The Dogger Bank itself, a broad, shallow rise in the sea floor, was once a low hill at the heart of this drowned landscape. It is easy, in the quietness of this knowledge, to picture those ancient people moving through reed beds and river meadows now far below. The flint blades rest now in museum drawers, each one a gentle reminder that the sea holds its memory for a very long time. Beneath the shallow gray waters of the southern North Sea, stone tools still rest where ancient hands left them, thousands of years ago. These are not simply rocks shaped by chance, but carefully knapped flint, worked by people who sat beside warm hearths on dry land. The hearths themselves are long dissolved, their embers cooled and scattered by 10,000 years of slow tides moving over them. Yet the tools remain, patient and still, as durable as the hands that shaped them were warm and alive. Trawler nets dragging slowly across the seabed have brought many of these tools back to the surface over the years. Fishermen would sometimes find a strange stone among their catch, an axe or a scraper, worn smooth at the edges by centuries of sand. Archaeologists have slowly pieced together where these tools were made, tracing the types of flint back to particular river valleys now deep beneath the sea. Some tools were made from flint gathered far inland, carried by hand across open ground to campsites near the ancient coastline. A scraper the size of a thumb, smooth on one edge and sharp on the other, would have cleaned an animal hide or prepared a meal. Around those ancient hearths, families gathered in the long evenings of a world that no longer exists above the waterline. The tools they left behind carry a quiet kind of memory, the weight of ordinary days lived carefully and slowly. Slowly, as sea levels rose over many generations, those campsites became shallows, and the shallows became open sea. And somewhere beneath the grey water of the North Sea, the last hearth of Doggerland grew cold, and was gently covered by the tide. Thousands of years ago, the land we now call Doggerland stretched wide and green between what is now Britain and continental Europe. Across this broad, low country, early human hunters followed herds of red deer and wild horse through open river valleys. The hunting grounds were rich and varied, stretching from dense birch woodlands along the ridges down to marshy estuaries near the coast. Flint tools left behind on the seafloor tell us where people once knelt beside streams, shaping blades for the day's work. Archaeologists have dredged beautifully worked spear tips from the North Sea floor, still carrying the shape of a careful hand. Along the slower rivers, hunters would have waited quietly for elk coming to drink at dusk, the landscape utterly still around them. The bones of mammoths and woolly rhinoceros have been pulled from trawler nets, remnants of the megafauna that once roamed here. This was not a barren or windswept place but a land of plenty, with freshwater lakes cupped between low hills. Pollen preserved in the seafloor sediment shows hazel and oak once grew here, their canopies sheltering the ground beneath. Small family groups would have moved with the seasons, following the salmon runs upstream each autumn as water levels shifted. Slowly, across many generations, the rising sea began to swallow the lowest meadows and river mouths, changing the shape of the land. The hunters and their children would have watched the water creep forward, retreating to higher ground without urgency, without drama. In time, the great hunting grounds slipped beneath the surface of the North Sea, and the world above the water changed forever. 10,000 years ago, the world's great ice sheets had begun their slow, inevitable retreat, releasing water back into the seas. The oceans rose, not with any sudden fury, but with a quiet, patient persistence that spanned many human generations. In the lands that would one day be called Doggerland, the rising waters crept inland across low marshy plains year by year. River valleys that had once sheltered human families gradually deepened and widened as seawater found its way inland. Geologists today can trace this ancient flooding through layers of peat and sediment pulled from the floor of the North Sea. Those dark bands of compressed organic material represent forests, meadows, and peat bogs that once breathed open air. Around 9,000 years ago, the North Sea basin had already swallowed much of what was once open, inhabited land. A great body of fresh water, held in glacial lakes to the north, finally gave way and poured southward into the rising ocean. This inflow of cold fresh meltwater mingled with the growing sea, reshaping the salinity and currents of a changing ocean. The flooding of Doggerland was not a single catastrophe but a long conversation between land and sea across centuries. Islands formed as higher ridges held above the water, scattered across what had once been connected hunting grounds. The people who lived through these changes adapted, as people always have, moving their settlements and their stories with the shifting shore. In time, even the highest remaining land slipped beneath the quiet grey water, and Doggerland passed from the world of the living. Beneath the North Sea, in water that has been cold and still for thousands of years, lie the chalk cliffs of what was once a living shoreline. These cliffs were carved by wind and rain long before the sea came, standing open to a sky that no longer reaches them. Slowly, as glaciers melted to the north, meltwater crept across the lowlands and the cliffs were swallowed, one tide at a time. Today they rest perhaps 30 meters below the surface, their white faces still pale and recognizable in the dim green light. Geologists who map the seafloor find these features with sonar, tracing the old coastal edge as clearly as a line drawn on paper. The chalk itself is ancient, formed from the compressed skeletons of tiny sea creatures that lived in a warm ocean hundreds of millions of years before Doggerland existed. It is one of those quiet ironies of geology that sea creatures built the cliffs, and the sea eventually claimed them back. When early Doggerland people camped near these cliffs, they would have looked up at the same white faces that rise above the English Channel today. Flint nodules embedded in the chalk were among the most prized materials of the Stone Age, and people came from great distances to gather them. Those same flint seams now lie beneath the cold North Sea, still embedded in the chalk, undisturbed for 8,000 years. In places, currents have scoured the seafloor and exposed the old cliff faces, and trawlers sometimes bring up pieces of ancient chalk with their nets. These fragments carry the memory of a shoreline that has not seen sunlight in 8 millennia, cool and smooth in the hand. Far below the surface now, those old chalk cliffs stand in their patient, unhurried way, holding the shape of a coast that time has not entirely forgotten. Beneath the southern North Sea, layer upon layer of soft ocean mud has preserved Doggerland for thousands of years. This mud, fine and silken, settled slowly over the drowned landscape like a gentle blanket drawn across sleeping fields. Geologists call these sediments a kind of natural archive, holding within them the memory of land that once was green and alive. In the deeper layers, pollen grains from ancient birch and hazel trees still drift, impossibly preserved, within the cold ocean mud. Far below where fishing trawlers pass today, the old soil horizon of Doggerland lies undisturbed, dark with ancient organic matter. Scientists have recovered fragments of wood and bone from this buried soil, each one a quiet messenger from a world long sealed away. The mud itself varies across the basin, thicker in the deeper channels where rivers once ran and fish once gathered in shallow pools. In some places, the peat layer is nearly a meter thick, built up over millennia by marshes and reed beds breathing slowly at the edge of the old land. Shells of freshwater mollusks have been found here too, carried by the currents of rivers that no longer exist anywhere on any map. Slowly, as centuries passed and the seas crept inward, these layers built up one upon another, sealing the old world beneath their weight. The compression of so many layers has turned some of the oldest sediments to a dense clay, almost like fired earth beneath the seabed. Within these sealed layers, researchers have found microscopic algae and insect remains that help reconstruct the seasons of a vanished world. And so the mud holds its quiet record still, patient and undisturbed beneath the open water, waiting for those who would listen. Along what was once a gently sloping shore, the people of Doggerland gathered shellfish in the quiet hours of early morning. They left behind great mounds of discarded shells, piled slowly over generations, silent records of countless meals shared beside the water. These middens, as archaeologists call them, rose to modest heights above the flat land, soft hills of pale shell and dark earth. Oysters were especially prized, their thick ridged shells accumulating in dense layers wherever communities returned season after season. Cockles and mussels joined the oysters, each species telling something quiet about the salinity and depth of waters long since gone. The waters here were calm and rich, sheltered estuaries where tidal currents moved slowly through beds of seagrass and reed. Families would have waded in the shallows, collecting what the tide offered, filling woven baskets with the sea's quiet abundance. In time the shells were piled not far from the water's edge, in places where the ground rose just slightly above the flood line. Some of these mounds endured for thousands of years before the sea finally rose to cover them in quiet layers of silt. Today, trawler nets occasionally drag fragments of these ancient mounds up from the floor of the North Sea. A single worn oyster shell, pulled from deep water, can carry 10,000 years of quiet history in its pale ridged surface. The middens remind us that long before history was written, people lived here in careful, attentive relationship with the sea. Slowly, over millennia, the tides rose and the mounds slipped beneath the water, as still and unhurried as the people who made them. Along the submerged ridgeline of what was once Doggerland, the seafloor rises gently in long, quiet swells of sediment. In certain places, the ridge crests just 40 meters beneath the surface, where the North Sea presses down with calm, even weight. Trawler nets dragged across these ridges for many decades, and what they pulled up sometimes was far older than any living fisherman could have expected. Slowly, over many years, museum curators and scientists began to notice whale bones appearing among the ordinary catches of the deep. These were not recent creatures but animals that had lived and died in the shallow marshes and estuaries of Doggerland thousands of years before. The bones carried the quiet record of a world that had been warm enough to sustain vast coastal grazing ground stretching to the horizon. Whale species now found only in warmer Atlantic waters once navigated the broad river mouths of this sunken land with ease. In time, rising seas flooded those river valleys, and the whales that had rested in their shallows were eventually buried beneath layers of peat and silt. Scientists examining the bones found collagen preserved well enough to date, placing some specimens at 8,000 years old or more. A ridge that once stood above floodwaters, covered in meadow grass and visited by migrating animals, now lies in cold silence far below the waves. The density of whale remains found near the Dogger Bank Ridge suggests it was a place these animals returned to, season after season. Slowly, the picture emerges of a landscape that was alive with movement, sound, and the slow breath of large animals resting in sheltered water. Now, far above the ridge, the North Sea moves in its long, unhurried rhythms, carrying the quiet memory of everything that once lived below. For centuries, fishermen working the shallow waters of the Dogger Bank have pulled up their nets to find something unexpected resting among the catch. Mixed among the cod and herring would come pieces of dark peat, ancient wood, and sometimes the bones of animals long gone from living memory. The fishermen of Hull and Grimsby knew these finds well, passing them between calloused hands before setting them aside at the end of a long day. A mammoth tooth, dark brown and ridged, would arrive in a net now and then, heavy and strange against the gleaming hull of fish. Some of these teeth found their way into the cabinets of curious collectors on shore, quietly preserving evidence of a very different world. Bones of woolly rhinoceros, straight-tusked elephant, and giant deer came up tangled in the nets across many decades of North Sea fishing. These were not random ocean creatures but animals that had walked on dry land, on a broad plain that once lay where only water now exists. In 1931 a fishing trawler named the Colinda brought up a lump of peat, and lodged within it was a beautifully carved antler harpoon. The harpoon was old enough to have been made and used by people who hunted along rivers and lockshores of the sunken Dogger Bank landscape. It had rested deep in the seabed for thousands of years before the nets of a steam trawler brought it quietly to the surface. The Colinda harpoon is now held in a museum, a small carved object that carries within it the whole lost world of Doggerland. Slowly, piece by piece, the nets were writing a record of that drowned world, gathering it up from the cold floor of the North Sea. In time researchers would come to understand that the fishermen had long been unknowing archaeologists, dragging the past gently into the light. Along the ancient floor of what was once a vast woodland, the trees of Doggerland grew tall and undisturbed for thousands of quiet years. Beneath the North Sea today, their roots still lie buried in peat, preserved in the cold and airless dark of the seafloor sediment. From the resin of these buried trees, amber slowly formed over millennia, droplet by amber droplet, hardening into something like frozen sunlight. Fishermen trawling the North Sea have brought amber pieces to the surface for centuries, smooth golden stones tumbling up in their nets alongside fish. Each piece holds within it the chemistry of that lost landscape, a record of the very trees that once shaded Doggerland's rivers and meadows. Some amber pieces contain tiny air bubbles, the breath of that ancient atmosphere trapped in golden silence for 8,000 years. Occasionally, a fragment of bark or a pine needle rests inside, perfectly held within the amber's warm interior, unchanged since the forest stood. The pine trees themselves were Scots pine, a species still alive today, their descendants growing across northern Europe in a quiet continuity. When scientists analyze the chemical signature of North Sea amber, they can trace it directly to these Pinus sylvestris trees of the Doggerland age. In time, the forests sank beneath rising seas, and the amber was sealed away in layers of peat and sand and gray marine clay. Far out beneath the waves now, the old pine stumps still stand upright in places, rooted to the seafloor as they were when living. When tides are very low along certain British coasts, stumps of these same ancient forests emerge briefly from the sand, dark and weathered and old. Slowly, the amber from that buried forest drifts northward in deep currents, and somewhere beneath the quiet water, the old forest waits. Scattered across the floor of the North Sea, among layers of silt and quiet darkness, lie objects carved by human hands thousands of years ago. These are antler harpoons, shaped and smoothed by the people who once lived on the land now swallowed by the sea. Fishermen trawling these waters have pulled such fragments up in their nets, sometimes not knowing at first what they had found. The antler itself came from red deer, animals that once roamed the wide grassy plains of Doggerland in great numbers. To shape a harpoon from antler, a skilled hand would score the bone slowly, patiently, working with flint tools in the firelight of a shelter. The barbs along the harpoon's shaft were cut one at a time, each angled so a speared fish could not slip free. Doggerland, in those quiet millennia, was threaded with rivers, wetlands, and shallow coastal lagoons teeming with fish. A harpoon thrown from a reed boat into still lagoon water was likely the sound of an ordinary morning for the people of this land. The harpoons recovered from the seabed are often dated to between 8 and 10,000 years ago, placing them in the final centuries of Doggerland's existence. As the seas rose slowly, year by year, the hunting grounds and fishing lagoons gradually disappeared beneath the water. Some harpoons may have been lost in the water during hunting trips, sinking quietly into the soft mud where they rested undisturbed. Others may have been left behind as families moved, abandoning their camps to the encroaching tide for the last time. Each harpoon carried up from the seabed is a quiet, patient reminder that a whole world once flourished here, just below where the water now rests. Beneath the cold gray waters of the North Sea, a river valley stretches silently through ancient submerged hills. This valley was once carved by a great river, flowing steadily westward through the heart of Doggerland. Sonar surveys reveal its gentle curve still visible on the seafloor, preserved beneath centuries of accumulated sediment. The valley walls slope softly, just as they did when deer and aurochs wandered quietly down to drink at its edges. Gravel beds and old clay banks still mark where the current once moved, patient and unhurried, through flat open land. Pollen and plant fragments preserved in the silk tell of alder trees lining the riverbanks in quiet groves. Sediment cores recovered from the North Sea floor carry fragments of reed and sedge, remnants of marshland at the valley's edge. Flint tools have been dredged from this buried valley, left behind by people who fished and camped along its banks. A bone harpoon recovered from the valley floor speaks gently of a hunter who once stood at the water's edge. The valley would have been a natural corridor, guiding people and animals quietly along its length through open country. As sea levels climbed slowly, the river's flow weakened, and saltwater crept inland from the west, season by season. The valley filled gradually with sea, the current ceasing, the riverbanks dissolving into the spreading quiet of the ocean. Now the valley rests far below the surface, undisturbed, holding its long memory of reeds and water and open sky. Thousands of years ago, people walked ancient pathways across a vast green plain that today lies beneath the sea. Those routes followed the gentle rise and fall of the land, tracing river valleys and sheltered woodland edges southward. Families moved slowly with the seasons, carrying their lives along corridors of fertile ground that curved around inland lakes. In time, these same paths grew quieter as the waters crept in from the edges, narrowing the land with each generation. Traces of those ancient migration routes are now preserved in the sediment far below the surface of the North Sea. Deep-sea survey vessels have recovered stone tools and animal bones from the very corridors where people once traveled. A carved antler point, dredged from the seabed, still holds the curve shaped by careful hands 10,000 years before. Along the northern edges of Doggerland, ridges of higher ground formed natural corridors that communities followed for generations. Some of those ridges can still be mapped today by sonar, their outlines traced quietly beneath 40 meters of water. Slowly the sea filled each valley first, leaving the high ground as islands for a while, still walkable, still green. People and animals alike sought these remaining patches of dry land, drawn together as the world contracted around them. In time even those islands disappeared, and the migration paths that had crossed a continent were swallowed completely by the sea. Tonight the North Sea holds those ancient roads in silence, resting beneath still water in the long, unhurried dark of the deep. Along the edges of what is now the southern North Sea, vast salt marshes once stretched quietly toward the horizon. These were gentle, in-between places, neither fully land nor fully sea, shifting slowly with each tide. Grasses with long, silver-green blades bent in the coastal breeze, their roots drinking from both fresh and salt water. Birds rested here in great numbers, drawn by the shallow pools and the quiet abundance of these sheltered waters. The people who lived near these marshes understood them deeply, moving through their channels and mudflats with practiced ease. Slowly, over many generations, the sea began to rise, and the marshes felt it first, growing salter and wider. The channels between grass islands widened, and what had been firm ground became soft and unreliable underfoot. Peat layers, built up over centuries from decaying marsh plants, began to be swallowed by the encroaching water. Sometimes, when the tide retreats today, ancient peat beds from Doggerland's marshes still surface on North Sea beaches. These dark, fibrous remnants carry within them the seeds and pollen of plants that no longer grow in this region. In time, the salt marshes that had nourished so many lives were submerged beneath several meters of cold sea water. What remains now lies quietly on the floor of the southern North Sea, undisturbed beneath the slow currents above. Far away from any shore, those drowned marshes rest in stillness, a gentle record of a world long since past. Memory, like water, does not vanish all at once, but retreats slowly, quietly, leaving only faint impressions behind. The people of Doggerland carried their stories in spoken words, passed gently from one generation to the next around quiet fires. When the land began to flood, those stories slowly lost their landmarks, the hills and rivers that gave them meaning disappearing beneath the sea. A child who once knew the name of a distant ridge would grow old in a world where that ridge no longer existed. Within a few generations, the very shape of the land that ancestors had named was gone, and the names dissolved quietly with it. Archaeologists have found bones and tools preserved in the silt of the North Sea, small quiet remnants of lives once fully lived. Each recovered object is a fragment of memory that the sea held for 8,000 years, patient and unhurried. There are no temples left, no carved stones, no written records to anchor the memory of Doggerland in human thought. What remains is held instead in the quiet language of soil, pollen grains, and animal remains recovered by patient hands. Scientists reading these layers move slowly backward through time, reconstructing forests and meadows that no living person has ever seen. The gradual erasure was not sudden but unfolded across many human lifetimes, gentle and inexorable as the tide itself. Today the North Sea holds this silence, stretching wide and calm above the memory of a world its waters slowly claimed. And somewhere far below, the earth keeps its record, patient and still, waiting for those who know how to listen. Along the low coastal margins of Doggerland, dense reed beds once stretched for miles in every direction, swaying gently in the salt-touched breeze. These reeds grew tall and thick, their roots threading deep into the dark peat beneath shallow brackish water, anchoring a living landscape. Century by century, the sea rose so gradually that no single generation would have noticed the slow claiming of these green and whispering places. Sediment cores pulled from the North Sea floor preserve these ancient reeds as compressed dark layers, still recognizable after 8,000 years. Pollen grains trapped within those layers tell us which plants once bloomed along Doggerland's sheltered waterways, season after quiet season. In time, the reed beds gave way at their seaward edges, dissolving slowly into tidal flats as the water crept inland with each passing decade. Behind the advancing water, the peat preserved everything it swallowed, seeds, roots, leaves, holding them in cold stillness for millennia. Fishing trawlers working the southern North Sea have brought up tangled masses of this ancient peat, dark and fibrous, onto their decks. Among these fragments, researchers have sometimes found the remains of reed roots still perfectly preserved, delicate as the day they were drowned. The reed beds would have been essential places, offering shelter, nesting grounds, and food for the communities living across Doggerland's wetlands. Slowly, as the centuries passed, the horizon of dry land shifted inward, and the reeds followed the retreating edge of the familiar world. Today those same reed beds rest silently beneath 40 meters of North Sea water, a quiet archive of a world that slipped away without drama. Far below the fishing boats and the wind, the drowned reeds of Doggerland remain, patient and still, remembering a gentler and quieter shore. Among the many things the North Sea has quietly returned to us, the bones of elk stand among the most unexpected and moving. These great animals once roamed the vast lowland plain where fishing trawlers now drag their nets through open water. The elk of ancient Doggerland were among the largest deer to walk the European landmass, their antlers spreading wider than a man is tall. When the waters rose, slowly and without witness, these animals retreated as far as they could before the land simply disappeared beneath them. For thousands of years their remains lay undisturbed in the soft sediment of the continental shelf, perfectly preserved in the cold and the quiet. Fishermen working the southern North Sea have brought up skull fragments and antler sections for well over a century, often not knowing quite what they held. A complete elk skull, with its wide brow and deep eye sockets, carries a certain quiet dignity even after 10,000 years on the seafloor. Scientists who study these bones can read within them the diet the animal kept, the season in which it died, and the landscape it called home. Isotopes locked inside the tooth enamel speak of fresh river grasses and woodland browse, the foods of a temperate and well-watered plain. Some skulls show the marks of human tools, careful cuts left by hunters who processed the carcass with practiced, unhurried hands. This tells us the people of Doggerland lived alongside these elk for generation after generation, hunting them through river valleys and along wooded ridges. In time, as the sea crept higher, both the hunters and the hunted were pressed toward higher ground, their shared world slowly swallowed. The skulls that surface now carry all of that with them, a whole vanished world held quietly in bone, waiting to be found. Along the floor of the North Sea, where Doggerland once spread wide and green, ancient footprints lie pressed into the sediment, waiting quietly. Thousands of years ago, people walked these low plains beside rivers and shallow lakes, leaving traces that the rising sea would one day cover and keep. Intertidal mudflats along the British coast have occasionally revealed footprint trails from that vanished world, pressed into layers of ancient peat. The peat itself is a clue, dark and fibrous, formed from marshes and reed beds that once flourished across the Doggerland plain. When archaeologists find these footprints, they are remarkably clear, the toes, the heel, the arch of a human foot preserved in perfect relief. Some trails show adults walking steadily across the mudflat, while smaller prints beside them suggest children keeping close. Animals left their marks here too, the delicate slots of deer, the rounded pads of aurochs, all moving across the same ancient ground. Occasionally, the footprints of a beaver or an otter cross the path of a human trail, a quiet record of a shared landscape. Scientists use photogrammetry to capture every footprint in 3 dimensions before the tide returns and the surface is altered again. Each footprint is dated using the peat it sits within, placing the walkers at the edge of Doggerland as it was slowly being swallowed. The feet that made these prints lived in a world of forest, river, and open grassland, unaware that the sea would one day cover everything. In time, the sediment settled over the prints, preserving them layer by layer through thousands of years of quiet darkness beneath the water. They rest there still, beneath the gentle motion of the North Sea, a soft and lasting reminder that this drowned world was once full of life. By this late chapter in Doggerland's story, only a narrow finger of land still reached above the cold gray sea. This final peninsula stretched northward like a quiet bridge between what had once been a vast and living world. Around it on every side, the sea had already claimed the lowlands, the river valleys, and the ancient marshes. Geologists who study this region today can trace the old shorelines buried beneath the seafloor sediments. Core samples pulled from the seabed reveal peats and forest soils, the quiet remains of a world that once breathed. The peninsula itself was likely low and windswept, covered in rough grasses and sea-bent shrubs near its edges. People who still lived on this remaining land would have watched the sea creep closer with each passing season. They would have known this place intimately, every inlet, every rise in the ground, every freshwater pool. The tools and bones left behind by these people have been dredged up by fishing trawlers over many decades. Each object carried to the surface is a small, quiet message from the last communities of Doggerland. As the water rose further, the peninsula shrank season by season, becoming an island for a time. The sea that covered this world was not violent in its coming, but slow and patient and inevitable. And so the last high ground of Doggerland slipped quietly beneath the surface, leaving only water above. Beneath the gentle waves of the North Sea, sediment has settled in quiet undisturbed layers for thousands of years. Among these layers, scientists have found something unexpected and quietly remarkable: thin bands of charcoal and ash. These ashen traces are the remnants of ancient campfires, lit by people who once lived on the land now swallowed by the sea. In time, the fires went cold, the ash settled into the earth, and the earth itself slowly descended beneath the rising waters. Each dark stripe within the submarine sediment is a quiet record of a single evening, a single hearth, a single family gathered against the cold. Geologists call these layers organic-rich horizons, but the words barely contain how human and ordinary these traces truly are. The charcoal has been dated by radiocarbon methods, placing some fires as far back as 9,000 years before the present day. At that time, Doggerland was still a broad and living landscape, threaded with rivers and sheltered by low wooded hills. The people who built those fires were skilled hunters and gatherers, moving quietly through forests that no longer exist above water. Their fires would have glowed warmly in the dusk, sending thin threads of smoke up through the branches overhead. Slowly, across many generations, the coastline crept inward and the familiar meadows and marshes began to disappear beneath shallow water. The ash from those last fires was sealed beneath accumulating sand and silt, preserved in the cold darkness of the seabed. And there it has rested, quietly, for thousands of years, waiting for the day when a dredge or a core sample would bring it gently back to light.